Dana Jenkins and her teenage son, Darren Cox, were found lifeless in their home, shrouded by the dark shadow of her son Deron Jenkins' recent prison release. Meanwhile, in Memphis, young mother Jeremy Caples was found dead inside her car, her murder still unsolved and her killer at large. These chilling cases hold dark secrets, unanswered questions, and a relentless pursuit of justice that refuses to fade away. Subscribe now to uncover the truth.
Bosses don't talk, we just sit back and listen. Then make boss moves. She like to argue, so I sent that bitch to law school.
Thank you, Lord.
For this time.
Yes, Lord.
Thank you for the life and legacy of Darren and Dana.
Yes, Lord.
Father, we pray continued strength and peace upon everyone assembled,
Yes, Lord.
especially the family.
In Wilson, North Carolina, a quiet residential neighborhood became the scene of a deadly mystery. On March 31st, 2025, police were dispatched to a home on Snowden Drive after receiving a report of unknown trouble. Inside, they found two individuals dead, an adult woman and a teenage boy. The victims were identified as Dana Jenkins and her 15-year-old son, Darren Cox. There were no signs of forced entry. No neighbors reported hearing gunshots or screams. The home appeared undisturbed from the outside. What unfolded behind those walls remains unclear, but a scene inside told investigators that this was not an accident, and that it was not random. 6 days before her death, Dana Jenkins made a public Facebook post celebrating the return of her eldest son from prison. My baby home. My MF baby. Lord, I thank you. The caption, filled with joy and religious gratitude, painted a picture of hope and redemption. But what happened in the hours and days that followed turned that celebration into silence, and would ultimately become the last public sign of peace inside the Jenkins home. The suspect, 25-year-old Deron Jenkins, had been released from prison just 6 days earlier. He was not a stranger to law enforcement, nor to the residents of that neighborhood. His criminal record included firearm theft and burglary, but nothing prior had hinted at the kind of violence investigators were now confronting.
A Wilson man is in jail, accused of killing his mother and his 15-year-old brother. WRL's Carly Haynes is live in Wilson with where this investigation stands. Carly, such a disturbing case.
Absolutely. This is on Snowden Drive where we are right now. We have seen cleaning crews going into the home where Wilson police say this happened. They've been entering with hazmat suits. You can see the green truck right there. And we learned from our reporting that Deron Jenkins, the suspect in this case, had been released from prison less than a week before he's accused of killing his mother and his brother.
The case raised immediate questions. What had happened in the days leading up to March 31st? Why was the crime committed so close to home? What were the underlying tensions, if any, between the victims and the accused? And how did the system miss warning signs? As investigators worked to piece together a timeline, new details surfaced about the victims, about the accused, and about what may have happened during the final hours inside the house. But much remains unknown, and with silence from those closest to the case, the mystery has only deepened. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Dana Vanessa Jenkins was a longtime resident of Wilson, North Carolina, and a known figure in her local community and church. She was a single mother raising her two sons, Deron and Darren, and had lived for many years in a modest home on Snowden Drive. Dana was active at Mount Moriah Community Church, where she regularly attended services and contributed her time to support events and community outreach programs. Professionally, Dana had a stable work history. While specific employment records have not been made public, friends and neighbors confirmed she held various positions over the years, typically in the service or healthcare sectors. She was considered reliable and self-sufficient, the primary caregiver and financial provider in her household. Neighbors described Dana as reserved but approachable, with a consistent routine and a deep dedication to her sons. Her extended family, including her cousin Junilla Cornegay, who lived next door, stated that Dana prioritized her children's well-being. She was said to be especially protective of Darren, her youngest, who still lived at home and was active in school and church. Dana's relationship with her older son, Deron Jenkins, was more complex. According to family members, she had supported him through repeated legal troubles and incarceration. There were attempts to keep him on track during his teenage years, but his behavior reportedly became more difficult over time. Though she never severed ties with him, the relationship appeared strained. Still, Dana allowed Deron to return to her home following his release from prison in late March 2025, a decision that would soon precede tragedy. Darren Cox was the youngest member of the family. At 15 years old, he was a student at Bedingfield High School and was involved in several extracurricular programs. He was particularly active in the media team at Mount Moriah Community Church, where he assisted with sound, live streaming, and visual production during services and events. Academically, Darren was described as a solid student who maintained average to above-average grades. Teachers and peers noted he was respectful, attentive, and well-liked in class. He had an interest in computers and audio technology, which he explored both at school and through his volunteer work at church. Darren's reputation among classmates was generally positive. He was seen as quiet but dependable. He kept a small circle of friends and maintained a consistent school attendance record. He had no reported behavioral issues, no conflicts with peers or faculty, and no known disciplinary history. He lived with his mother, Dana, and at times his older brother, Deron, though that arrangement changed depending on Deron's legal situation. There were no publicly known reports of conflict between Darren and his brother prior to the murder, but those close to the family suggested Darren was uncomfortable during Deron's more volatile periods. Still, there was no official indication of violence in their relationship until a fatal incident occurred. Deron Dante Jenkins was 25 years old at the time of the double homicide. His criminal history began several years earlier and included charges for gun theft and multiple incidents involving vehicle break-ins. He had spent time in North Carolina correctional facilities and had developed a record of property crimes and parole violations. By 2025, Jenkins had served a sentence for firearm-related offenses and was released from incarceration on March 25, 2025, just 6 days before the murders took place. The specific correctional institution from which he was released has not been disclosed, but sources confirm that his release was routine and not under any early release program. It is unknown whether he received mental health evaluations or reintegration counseling before reentering society. While in prison, records indicate that Jenkins was involved in minor disciplinary actions, though none that would classify him as violent. His eligibility for parole had been reviewed previously, but was denied due to concerns about his stability and lack of support plan. Following his release, he returned to live at his mother's residence. There are no indications that any official parole officer or reentry monitor was actively tracking his reintegration. It's unclear if he had employment plans or support programs arranged post-release. Deron's relationship with his mother, Dana Jenkins, had deteriorated over the years, according to relatives. Though she never formally distanced herself from him, relatives say she struggled with his behavior and past legal issues. Despite the tension, she allowed him back into the family home after his March 2025 release. His dynamic with his younger brother, Darren Cox, was less public. Neighbors did not recall seeing the two interact frequently. Family members reported that Darren kept his distance from Deron and that the two had limited communication. No official complaints or domestic violence calls were recorded involving the two prior to the incident. There were no known psychiatric diagnoses, but those close to the family observed troubling signs. Cousin Janilla Cornegay mentioned that Deron sometimes exhibited erratic behavior, paranoia, or emotional withdrawal. These observations were never formally addressed with professionals, and no public record shows any history of treatment or therapy. On March 25, 2025, Deron Jenkins was released from state prison and returned to his mother's home. His arrival in the neighborhood did not initially raise alarm. Residents recognized him and had seen him around before. In the first few days post-release, there were no reported disturbances at the house. Family members and neighbors began noticing subtle signs of unease. According to cousin Janilla Cornegay, she observed Deron outside the home several times in the days following his release. On one occasion, he appeared agitated and had visible cuts on his hand. When asked about them, he offered no explanation and seemed disoriented. She stated he looked like he did something, but she couldn't identify what. No specific arguments were overheard in the days leading up to March 31st. However, Cornegay reported hearing a loud noise from inside the home on the afternoon of March 31st. She did not initially call authorities, assuming it might have been a minor domestic issue. Only later did the severity become clear. On March 31st, 2025, at approximately 5:30 p.m., emergency dispatch in Wilson, North Carolina, received a 911 call categorized as unknown trouble. The caller was a concerned relative, identified later as cousin Juanilla Cornegay, who lived next door to the victims. She had reportedly been unable to reach 50-year-old Dana Jenkins throughout the day and had also not seen 15-year-old Darren Cox, who normally would have returned home from school by mid-afternoon. Cornegay later stated that she felt something was wrong. Her suspicions escalated when she noticed the front door of the house was ajar. Upon attempting to make contact and receiving no response, she made the emergency call. During the 911 call, the operator was informed of a possible welfare concern. The caller stated that 2 residents were unresponsive and there may have been a disturbance inside the home. The caller did not initially report seeing a weapon or visible injuries, but expressed urgency and fear that something violent had occurred. Wilson Police Department officers arrived at the residence on Snowden Drive within minutes of the 911 call. The front entrance was found partially open. Officers announced themselves and entered the home, conducting a quick tactical sweep of the premises. Inside, they discovered the bodies of Dana Jenkins and her son Darren Cox. Both were deceased. Dana was found lying in the living room area, while Darren's body was discovered further into the residence, reportedly in or near his bedroom.
Now to the double murder in Wilson County. We're learning the suspect is charged with killing his own brother and his mother. Police identifying the victims as 50-year-old Dana Jenkins and her 15-year-old son, Darren Cox. Jenkins' 25-year-old son, Darion Jenkins, is now charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The victims were found inside a home yesterday evening on Snowden Drive. Cindy Bay has new reaction from the family.
Loved ones are reeling from the death of a mother and son who police say were found dead inside their Wilson home on Monday.
She was a very sweet person. Always smiled. I can see her smile right now. She always smiled.
Juanilla Carnegie lives next door to her cousin Dana Jenkins, who was allegedly killed by her older son, 25-year-old Darion Jenkins. Jenkins is also accused of killing his 15-year-old brother, a Wilson County school student who is being remembered by Bedingfield High School and Mount Moriah Community Church in Wilson.
They loved each other. They loved us. We loved them, especially Darren. He meant the world to all of us. Our teens here, they're grieving heavily.
According to court documents, Jenkins was released from prison on March 25th on separate charges, just 1 week before the incident. Jenkins is facing 2 counts of first-degree murder as Wilson police investigate the circumstances surrounding the victims' deaths.
This is a tragedy, and honestly, there is no winner in this. And I'll be praying for everyone watching this, everyone affected by this and impacted by this.
Cindy Bay, ABC 11 Eyewitness News.
Officers noted no immediate signs of forced entry, and no visible struggle was reported in the main living areas. The home appeared largely undisturbed, which ruled out robbery as a likely motive in the early stages of investigation. Crime scene technicians were called in. During the evidence collection process, they recovered 1 firearm, believed to be the weapon used in the killings, blood evidence throughout parts of the residence, fingerprints and DNA samples taken from several surfaces. No signs of ransacking or missing property. Additionally, law enforcement began canvassing nearby homes for any surveillance camera footage that may have captured activity near the property. At least one neighbor provided home security video showing Darion Jenkins entering the home on the day of the murders and exiting hours later. The bodies were transported to the office of the chief medical examiner in Raleigh, North Carolina. Preliminary autopsy findings were released within several days of the incident. Dana Jenkins died of a gunshot wound to the chest, consistent with close-range discharge. Darren Cox was also killed by a single gunshot wound, reported to be to the upper body region, possibly the head or chest. Both victims sustained fatal injuries from gunfire. The medical examiner reported that the wounds were immediate and fatal, suggesting minimal time for reaction or escape. Based on lividity and body temperature, the estimated time of death for both victims was placed between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. on March 31st, approximately 3 to 5 hours before the 911 call. Daron Jenkins' DNA was recovered from the murder weapon, which was found hidden in a utility closet inside the home. No foreign fingerprints were located on the doorknobs, suggesting the killer had access to the home, either through a key or familiarity with its security. Gunshot residue was found on clothing discovered in the washing machine, believed to have been worn by Daron earlier that day. There was no indication of forced entry, further confirming that the suspect likely had unrestricted access to the home at the time of the killings. He was arrested on March 31st, 2025, near the residence, approximately 2 blocks away. Shortly after the discovery of the crime scene, police located Daron Dante Jenkins, the 25-year-old son of Dana Jenkins, and older brother to Darren Cox. He was found walking alone through the neighborhood. According to police reports, he showed no signs of panic or resistance at the time of contact. Upon questioning, Jenkins allegedly gave inconsistent statements regarding his whereabouts earlier in the day. His hands had visible cuts and dried blood. Officers noted this and detained him on suspicion of involvement. He was transported to the Wilson County Jail for further questioning. At the time of his arrest, Daron did not confess, but refused to answer key questions, instead requesting legal counsel. He was booked on 2 counts of first-degree murder pending further investigation. On April 1st, 2025, Daron Jenkins was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Dana Jenkins and Darren Cox, unlawful possession of a firearm by a felon due to his previous conviction and prison sentence. The charges carry potential penalties ranging from life without parole to the death penalty under North Carolina law, depending on aggravating factors determined by prosecutors. Jenkins was brought before a judge for his first appearance at the Wilson County Courthouse.
According to court documents, Jenkins was released from prison on March 25th on separate charges, just 1 week before the incident. Jenkins is facing 2 counts of first-degree murder as Wilson police investigate the circumstances surrounding the victims' deaths.
The prosecution requested no bond, citing the violent nature of the crime. His recent release from prison on March 25, 2025, prior felony convictions, the familial relationship to victims, arguing that the crime demonstrated a high level of premeditation or emotional detachment. The defense provided no formal response to the charges during this initial hearing, but requested a mental health evaluation to assess Jenkins' competency to stand trial. A public defender was appointed due to Jenkins' indigent status. The judge denied bond, remanding Jenkins to custody at the Wilson County Detention Center without the possibility of release pending trial. In the days following the deaths of Dana Jenkins and her 15-year-old son Darren Cox, the Wilson, North Carolina community experienced a stark shift. The neighborhood, once described by residents as peaceful and routine, became a site of collective shock. Police vehicles, yellow tape, and investigators replaced the quiet familiarity of family homes. The violent deaths of mother and son, allegedly at the hands of a family member, introduced a level of fear and unease that spread beyond Snowden Drive. Residents expressed fear, confusion, and disbelief. Most were unaware of any prior conflict or indication that violence might erupt in the Jenkins household. Local neighbors reported that they had seen Daron Jenkins around the house after his release from prison, but did not expect anything out of the ordinary. Statements made to local media described Dana Jenkins as kind and private. Many could not reconcile the image of the family they knew with the reality of the crime scene investigators uncovered. Church members from Mount Moriah Community Church, where both Dana and Darren were active, spoke briefly to reporters. Dana was involved in women's ministries, and Darren served on the media production team for Sunday services. A member of the church leadership stated that they were devastated and tried to support the surviving relatives in any way possible. No official church-wide statement was released immediately, but internal prayer services and counseling sessions were held. A candlelight vigil was organized by neighbors and churchgoers 3 days after the bodies were discovered. Local law enforcement helped manage traffic as dozens of community members gathered to light candles, pray, and reflect. Darren's classmates and some of Dana's former co-workers attended. No political figures were present, and media coverage remained local and limited. Bedingfield High School responded by deploying its crisis team to provide grief counseling to students and staff. Darren Cox, a 10th grade student, was described by peers as soft-spoken, talented, and always respectful. Teachers remembered his interest in digital production and his consistent participation in media projects. The school district released a brief written statement expressing condolences to the family and offering support to those affected. It did not comment on the nature of the deaths, citing the ongoing criminal investigation. Darren's teachers organized a tribute wall in the school hallway, where students wrote memories and messages. Counselors remained available for a week after the incident, though attendance temporarily dropped as news of the murder spread. The most significant family statement came from Juanilla Cornegay, a cousin of Dana Jenkins who lived next door. She told reporters she saw Deron Jenkins on the day of the murders and described his demeanor as off. According to Cornegay, he had fresh cuts on his hands and appeared jumpy. She described him as if he had done something and was trying to conceal it. This account added weight to the timeline being pieced together by investigators. Extended family members refrained from speaking to media in detail. A few brief social media tributes circulated online, expressing shock and grief, but avoiding direct reference to the criminal allegations. No public disputes among family members were reported in the immediate aftermath. The funeral for Dana Jenkins and Darren Cox was held on April 2nd, 2025, at a local church in Wilson. It was a closed casket service due to the nature of the injuries sustained. The service was attended by local pastors, school staff, and members of the community. No members of the press were allowed inside. A separate private burial followed the service. There is no public record of previous violent incidents involving Deron Jenkins and his family. However, court records confirm his prior incarceration for gun theft and vehicle break-ins. There is no indication from public databases that Dana Jenkins had ever filed a domestic complaint or sought protective orders. Whether there were unreported incidents or internal family tension remains unknown. The weapon used in the murders was identified by authorities as a firearm. Although specific make and model details were not publicly released, the weapon was recovered at the scene. Ballistics testing was conducted to confirm that the gun matched the fatal injuries sustained by both Dana and Darren. Preliminary results confirmed this match, and the gun was sent to state crime lab for further analysis. Fingerprints found on the firearm were consistent with Deron Jenkins. Investigators also collected DNA samples from the scene, including blood found on Deron's clothing. A full forensic sweep of the home was conducted, with emphasis on entry points, evidence of struggle, and time of death indicators. Investigators constructed a timeline from available evidence, neighbor accounts, and digital records. Deron was released from prison on March 25, 2025, and returned to the Jenkins residence shortly after. Surveillance footage from a neighbor security system showed Deron entering and exiting the home on multiple occasions over the following days. No other individuals were seen entering the house during the relevant period. Police believe the murders occurred sometime between the late night of March 30th and the early morning of March 31st. As for motive, law enforcement has not publicly confirmed one. Theories under consideration include possible financial disputes, post-incarceration tension, or mental health deterioration. Some investigators noted Deron may have been struggling to reintegrate after prison. There is no evidence to suggest robbery or forced entry from an outside party. Toxicology reports on Deron were ordered following his arrest. While those results have not been released, investigators did question whether substance abuse may have been involved. No drugs were immediately found at the scene. A psychiatric evaluation of Deron Jenkins was requested by the court during his first appearance on April 1st. The evaluation is being conducted to assess his mental state at the time of the killings and to determine competency to stand trial. There is no prior publicly documented history of psychiatric hospitalization, but court-appointed psychologists are now reviewing his behavioral history and any warning signs that may have preceded the incident. The legal proceedings in the case of Deron Dante Jenkins, charged with the murders of his mother, Dana Jenkins, and his 15-year-old brother, Darren Cox, are expected to center around the severity of the crime, the suspect's criminal history, and his psychological state at the time of the killings. Both the prosecution and defense have signaled key strategies that may determine the case's trajectory in court. The prosecution's approach is likely to be direct, anchored in three primary arguments: Duran's prior convictions, the possibility of premeditation, and physical evidence collected at the crime scene. Prosecutors will highlight Duran's recent release from prison just 6 days before the murders. His prior convictions for firearms theft and burglary demonstrate a pattern of criminal behavior. They are expected to argue that this history indicates both a disregard for the law and a potential for escalating violence. The short time span between his release and the homicides may be used to argue that he posed a continuing threat to society. Prosecutors may pursue a first-degree murder charge based on the theory of premeditation. They are expected to examine Duran's actions leading up to the murders, his return to the family home, any potential procurement of a weapon, and any communications that suggest prior planning. The absence of forced entry may support their argument that Duran was willingly allowed in by the victims, reinforcing the claim that they were unaware of any threat. The prosecution will need to distinguish whether the killings were spontaneous or calculated. Evidence from the crime scene, such as fingerprints, DNA, ballistic reports, if a firearm was used, and the manner in which the bodies were found, will be essential to linking Duran to the crime. Blood traces, surveillance footage in the area, and phone data may form the basis of forensic testimony. Prosecutors will aim to establish Duran's sole presence at the time of death and any attempt to conceal evidence or flee. Duran's defense team faces significant hurdles, given the nature of the charges. They are expected to explore three main lines of defense: mental illness, the lack of clear motive, and the psychological state of Duran following his release. The defense may argue that Duran was not of sound mind during the incident. His recent incarceration, potential lack of access to mental health treatment while in prison, and sudden reintegration into society may be presented as contributing factors to a mental health crisis. If court-appointed psychiatrists confirm a diagnosis, such as schizophrenia or psychosis, the defense may request a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity or reduced culpability due to diminished capacity. The defense is likely to challenge the prosecution's narrative by pointing out that there is no documented history of violent conflict between Duran and his mother or brother. Without clear evidence of motive, such as inheritance disputes, threats, or documented animosity, they may argue that the prosecution's case is built primarily on circumstantial evidence. They may further suggest that the murders were not logical or intentional, but instead the result of an undiagnosed mental breakdown. Adjustment to life outside prison can be mentally destabilizing, especially without structured support. The defense may argue that Duran's reentry plan was insufficient, and he lacked the supervision necessary to reintegrate safely. They may question whether he was provided psychiatric care during or after incarceration, and suggest that his fragile mental state contributed directly to his actions. Given the weight of the evidence and the emotional gravity of the case, the possibility of a plea deal is expected to surface. Could Duran plead guilty to avoid trial? To avoid a lengthy trial and potential death sentence, Duran's legal team may negotiate a plea agreement. In exchange for a guilty plea, prosecutors could agree to take the death penalty off the table. This would result in a sentence of life imprisonment without parole and spare the family and community from the emotional strain of a public trial. Possible sentencing outcomes. If found guilty at trial of first-degree murder, without a plea deal, Duran could face life in prison without the possibility of parole or capital punishment, depending on whether prosecutors pursue it and the jury agrees. If the court accepts a plea or diminished responsibility defense, lesser charges such as second-degree murder or manslaughter may be considered, though unlikely given the circumstances. Despite the legal processes in motion, several unresolved questions continue to hang over this case, leaving investigators and the public seeking deeper clarity. Why did Duran kill his own family? If proven, no documented motive has emerged. Did a conflict arise post-release? Was there an argument? Was Duran suffering from a psychotic episode? Without confession or credible witness testimony, the motive remains speculative. Could this have been prevented by parole monitoring? Duran was released without signs of immediate concern. Questions have been raised about the adequacy of post-release monitoring. Did he receive a mental health evaluation before release? Were there missed opportunities for intervention? Were there warning signs missed by authorities or relatives? Family members noted odd behavior in the hours before the murders. Cuts on Duran's hands, nervous energy, and silence. These signs, though vague, may be re-examined in hindsight as missed red flags. Was he acting erratic in the days prior? Did anyone witness or hear anything? The house was located in a residential neighborhood. No neighbors reported hearing gunshots or screaming. Did Duran act in the middle of the day? Was a silencer used, or were the deaths silent in nature? The silence is still unexplained. What was the final interaction between Dana, Darren, and Duran? It is unclear what was said or done in the hours leading up to crime. Was there a final dinner, a conversation, or an argument? This timeline gap remains key to understanding motive. Impact on Wilson community moving forward. The murder sent shockwaves through the small town. Many residents who knew the family were left grappling with disbelief. The notion that a mother and child could be killed by another family member days after release from prison raised concerns about public safety and reentry systems. Initiatives or changes sparked by the case. The case has reopened discussions about the supervision of recently released inmates, the availability of post-prison mental health care, screening for violent tendencies in parolees. Local advocacy groups are pushing for mandatory psychiatric evaluations upon release for individuals with prior felony records. Reflection from church and school on the lives lost. Dana and Darren were known for their involvement at Mount Moriah Community Church. Darren, in particular, was remembered by church staff and teachers as bright and respectful. The church held a candlelight vigil, and Beddingfield High School provided counseling services. Final thoughts on justice and unanswered questions. The legal process may result in a conviction, but many questions may never be fully answered. The case highlights the complexity of familial violence, the challenges of reintegration, and the gaps in social systems designed to prevent such tragedies. As the trial approaches, the Wilson community waits, not only for a verdict, but for resolution, clarity, and the hope that lessons will be learned from the darkness that unfolded inside a quiet home. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.
Step out for show.
What's up, Grace?
Stepping out for show. What's up, Jay? Great. Man, take that shit off. Look at Leah. Oh, man, y'all got her money with. She ain't fucking with me.
Jeremy Caples was 26 years old. She lived in Memphis and had 2 children. In November 2021, she went to pick up her boyfriend from prison following his release.
Get out my way! Where Great Flag? Where Great Flag at, bro? All right, Be great, yeah! Be great, yeah! Be great! Okay. Talk your shit, great. Talk your shit. Be great.
Free who?
Yeah.
Big ball out.
Ain't no more free my dude. Fuck.
Days later, she was found dead inside her vehicle. The location was South Memphis. She had been shot. Her body was in the driver's seat. There were no signs of a break-in, no missing belongings, and no known witnesses.
A loving mother, sister, and daughter now at the center of a murder investigation. Memphis police found the 25-year-old killed in the Nutbush neighborhood. The woman's family continues to mourn while police search for her killer in tonight's Manhunt Monday.
Her phone and purse were still inside the car. The area was quiet, and no one nearby reported hearing anything unusual. Police responded. An investigation was opened. No one was arrested. No suspect was named. There were no updates from law enforcement beyond the initial confirmation of her death. The man she picked up from prison was not publicly linked to the case by authorities. His status remains unclear. Family members started asking questions. They held press conferences, vigils, and posted online about the timeline and the lack of answers. They asked the public to help fill in the missing pieces. There are questions about what happened between the time she picked him up and when her body was discovered. Where did she go? Who was she with? What conversations took place? What surveillance footage, phone records, or text messages were reviewed? This case remains unsolved. No public progress has been reported. The timeline is limited. The official statements are minimal. This story will examine what is known, what is missing, and what questions remain unanswered in the death of Jeremy Caples. It begins with a pickup at a prison gate and ends with a murder that is yet to be explained. What happened during those missing hours? Who was the last person to see her alive? And why has no one been held responsible?
He took my little sister for nothing, man. She do nothing to nobody.
Candace Parker and her father are searching for a killer. Memphis police say 25-year-old Jeremy Caples was murdered last November in Nutbush.
She told me she was going to school, and when she left school, she was going to meet somebody to get some shoes. I guess she never made it that far.
Parker says she tried calling her sister, but her calls went unanswered. Something Parker says was highly unusual for the mother of two. So Parker went to her sister's house looking for answers.
When I got to my sister's house, I felt it. Something was wrong. And that's when the detectives told us we had to stay there for a minute. When they said that, I already knew my sister was gone.
Parker says detectives told them they found her sister's body inside her white Jeep Cherokee on Prince Street.
She got shot in the head, came out through the back, through her side. I never think I'd put my sister in a casket, man. We just want justice for her, that's it.
Parker believes the gunman may have known her sister and says she may have been the target of a robbery.
I just want justice for my sister. I can't sleep. I can't eat, y'all. I need help. I need help.
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds. Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Jeremy Caples was a 26-year-old woman living in Memphis, Tennessee. She was a mother of two young children and known within her community as someone deeply connected to her family. Friends and relatives describe her as hardworking, loyal, and outgoing, someone who cared deeply for her children and those around her. She maintained a strong support system and often posted affectionate content about her kids and close family members on social media. At the time of her death, Jeremy was in a long-term relationship with a man who had been serving time in prison. This relationship had continued through his incarceration. She remained supportive during his sentence and kept in regular communication with him. There are no official reports that indicated she ever filed complaint or expressed fear related to the relationship. However, after her death, friends and acquaintances hinted at a possible underlying tension in the relationship, something that had never reached legal or public documentation. In early November 2021, Jeremy's boyfriend was released from prison. Reports indicate that she personally went to pick him up, a gesture that showed the level of trust and closeness they shared. Her decision to bring him back into her life and possibly her home showed her commitment to helping him re-enter society. Her social media accounts around that time suggested she was hopeful and positive about the reunion. There were no alarming posts or warnings. She did not express concerns publicly or privately in a way that led to any documented red flags. Those close to her assumed she was doing what she believed was right, supporting someone she had invested time in emotionally. After her death, some of her friends suggested that Jeremy might have overlooked early warning signs or felt emotionally pressured to keep the relationship intact. Still, none of these claims were substantiated through police reports, domestic violence filings, or protective orders. Less than 72 hours after her boyfriend's release from prison, Jeremy Caples was found dead. On or around the third day following his return, she was discovered inside her vehicle, unresponsive, in the South Memphis area. Law enforcement later confirmed she had been shot.
A loving mother, sister, and daughter now at the center of a murder investigation. Memphis police found the 25-year-old killed in the Nutbush neighborhood. The woman's family continues to mourn while police search for her killer in tonight's Manhunt Monday.
The precise time of death was not disclosed publicly. Her body was found inside her own car, and it became immediately clear to responding officers that she had been fatally injured. The cause of death was gunshot wounds. No weapon was recovered at the scene. Initial public reports stated that no suspects were arrested or named. The case was considered open but inactive within a few weeks. Police confirmed they were investigating but provided no updates. No known eyewitnesses came forward. There was no immediate confession, surveillance footage released to the public, or a concrete timeline provided between her last known whereabouts and the moment her body was discovered. The vehicle was found in a relatively quiet location near where Jeremy lived. It was not in a remote or wooded area, but was parked in an inconspicuous location within a Memphis neighborhood. According to police and media reports, the crime scene did not show visible signs of a struggle. There was no broken glass, no forced entry into the vehicle, and no items appeared to have been stolen. Her identification, personal belongings, and phone were still inside the car. The presence of her belongings indicated that robbery was likely not the motive. Instead, the crime had characteristics of a targeted shooting, though that possibility was never confirmed by police. The area where her body was found was cordoned off for investigation, but within a few days, law enforcement cleared the scene and made no public disclosures regarding potential suspects, fingerprints, or ballistic evidence. Authorities arrived shortly after the body was discovered, but their presence yielded minimal new information for the family or the public. The lack of transparency added to the family's frustration and the community's speculation. Why do you think there were no public updates about the investigation? Could this case have been prevented with earlier intervention? Should law enforcement be required to give families more transparency when there are no suspects? Was this a case of intimate partner violence that went undetected? What steps can be taken to prevent such unresolved tragedies from being forgotten? The Memphis Police Department issued a brief public statement confirming that a homicide had occurred and that a young woman had been killed. However, they refrained from naming any persons of interest, and no arrests were made. The lack of transparency led to growing frustration among Memphis residents and Caples family members. Many question why law enforcement appear to be moving so slowly in what seemed to be a solvable case. Jeremy's boyfriend, the last known person to see her alive, was not officially named as a suspect. It was unclear whether he had been interviewed, detained, or even located following her death. Community members began voicing their concerns over what they viewed as a delayed and inadequate investigative response. The lack of immediate action prompted questions about whether crucial evidence had been lost, and if key opportunities to secure interviews or surveillance footage had passed. Despite these issues, the Memphis Police Department provided little more than surface-level updates to the public. There were no press conferences, no published timeline of events, and no public calls for specific witnesses. This silence would only amplify public concern in the weeks that followed. As days turned into weeks with no progress in the case, Jeremy Caples' family stepped forward with urgency. Her father, Jerry Caples, appeared on local television, pleading for answers. He stated that his daughter had been loyal, kind, and undeserving of such a fate. He called for accountability and implored anyone with information to come forward.
And tonight, a family searching for answers 2 years after the homicide of Jeremy Caples. Our Zaria Oates sat down with the family about their search for the suspect and the grief they manage every day.
Nearly 2 years ago, Jeremy Caples was shot and killed across town from her family home here in Frazier, over in the Nutbush area. Her family and friends continue to look for answers every single day.
Please speak up for my sister, y'all. Please.
What happened to Jeremy Caples is something no family prepares for.
She was found in the back of the vehicle, slumped over on the driver's side. She had been shot once in the head.
This video shows a suspect leaving the scene, 2 years later, the person still hasn't been identified.
The murder was picked up by a door cam, leaving the vehicle, so which kind of led me to believe that the person might stay somewhere in the area.
So he searches the area frequently, looking for any clues he can find. A tragedy no one can wrap their head around.
Loving, kind, sweet, don't bother nobody. And for them to take her life for nothing, it's hurting me, it's hurting my dad, it's hurting her mom.
It was a senseless act of violence. That's all it was. And I hate that.
An act of violence, leaving every one of her family members searching for closure.
And I'm not going to rest. I'm not going to sleep. I'm not going to stop screaming justice for Jeremy.
Her father, Jerry Caples, does believe someone knows what happened to his daughter. If you know any information at all, please contact the Memphis Police Department's Crime Stoppers at 901-528-CASH. In Fraser, I'm Zaria Oates.
The family expressed their dissatisfaction with how the case was being handled. They questioned the police department's lack of communication and criticized what they perceived as a dismissive attitude toward their grief and search for justice. According to relatives, requests for case updates were either ignored or met with vague responses that offered no clarity. Determined not to let her death be forgotten, the family held vigils and memorial services across the city. These gatherings, often held near the location where Jeremy's body was found or at her childhood home, served both as a remembrance and a demand for justice. They also began leveraging digital platforms. Her sister and mother used Facebook and Instagram to share photos, video tributes, and their frustrations with the lack of legal movement. Their emotional posts gained traction across Memphis and beyond, prompting interest from journalists, bloggers, and true crime content creators. They also reached out directly to podcast hosts, YouTubers, and independent investigators, sharing timelines, phone records, and text message screenshots they believed could help. They were not content to wait for an update. They began building their own form of awareness and advocacy in parallel to the official investigation. Jeremy's story quickly resonated across Memphis. In response to the family's public appeals, local community members mobilized in a variety of ways. Facebook groups and online forums were created in her name. These spaces allowed people to share updates, rumors, theories, and support for her grieving family. Hashtag campaigns, including hashtag Justice for Jeremy, gained traction on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Local influencers and community organizers helped spread the word about her death, emphasizing the perceived injustice and encouraging followers to pressure the police for answers. Offline, grassroots efforts included community-led marches and candlelight vigils. Many of these events were organized by residents who had never met Jeremy but were disturbed by the silence surrounding her case. They carried signs with her photo, shared flyers, and passed out contact information for local tip lines. Flyers were also posted in surrounding neighborhoods, gas stations, shopping centers, and outside police precincts. These included details of the case and the message that someone, somewhere, knew what had happened. At each vigil, speakers reminded attendees that this was not just a family's tragedy but a community issue, one that spoke to broader problems of transparency, justice, and the protection of women in vulnerable situations. Residents urged one another to stay engaged and not let the case disappear from public attention. Despite the public outcry and the family's constant advocacy, weeks turned into months without any significant developments in the investigation. The boyfriend, who had just been released from prison days before Jeremy's death, reportedly disappeared from the public eye. Community members speculated whether he had fled, was in hiding, or had simply been overlooked by investigators.
Talking about why I ain't saying nothing. What the fuck? I ain't got to post nothing on Facebook. Let me grieve how I'm grieving him. Let me grieve how I'm grieving him. I ain't got to grieve. I ain't got to go like crying, doing all that cap ass. Want some likes and shares and shit. I ain't got to do all that. Yeah. I need junkie, broke ass bitch. Man, all you hold junkie hell. On God. On my little girl, y'all junkie hell. All you hold that was just at my house. Erica, LaQuisha, Candy, all you junk ass, broke ass bitches, you know what I'm saying, was just in my face here, and now y'all getting on Facebook with all this cap ass shit. You a whole junkie hell. Oh God. None of you hoes having nothing at all.
As more time passed, theories about a possible cover-up began circulating online. Some believe that the case had been deprioritized because of systemic issues within the Memphis justice system. Others questioned whether investigators had collected and analyzed all available evidence, including cell phone records, location tracking, and surveillance footage from nearby areas. The Memphis Police Department did not hold follow-up press conferences, and no additional suspects were named publicly. Calls from the family for answers were again met with silence. It was unclear if the case was still being actively pursued or if it had gone cold. This absence of progress added to the growing mistrust between the public and law enforcement, the sense that a young woman's life had been taken and that no one would be held accountable, spread frustration throughout the city. The Caples family refused to give up. They continued to share reminders of Jeremy's story on social media and organize anniversary memorials to keep the case in the public eye. Independent content creators released timelines, voiceovers, and maps reconstructing the possible final movements of both Jeremy and her boyfriend. Yet, as of 2025, no one has been arrested. No public updates have been given regarding leads, evidence, or interviews. And Jeremy Caples' children are still being raised without their mother, while her family continues to demand justice from a system that is yet to deliver it. Months after the death of 26-year-old Jeremy Caples, interest in her case began to expand beyond Memphis, Tennessee. With no arrests, limited police updates, and growing frustration from the public, several independent true crime YouTube channels, bloggers, and podcasters began investigating the circumstances of her death. These creators focus heavily on the final days of Jeremy's life, particularly the timeline surrounding the day she picked up her boyfriend from prison and the hours leading up to when her body was discovered. Many pointed out a notable inconsistency. There was a time gap of several hours during which Jeremy's whereabouts were unclear. Family members reported that she was unreachable by phone. Her last known communications were reportedly brief and vague. According to independent timelines reconstructed using Facebook activity and secondary witness accounts, she was last seen alive in the early afternoon, but was not reported found until hours later in the evening, already deceased in her vehicle. The missing hours raised significant concerns. Why wasn't a timeline provided by police? Was her phone tracked or pinged? Had anyone spoken to the boyfriend during those hours? These were questions that creators began pushing publicly. In the absence of answers, speculation grew. Some channels uncovered criminal records indicating that the boyfriend had prior run-ins with the law, including a past that allegedly involved domestic violence or controlling behavior toward partners. While none of these records have been confirmed publicly by law enforcement, commentators noted that such a history should have made him a prime person of interest in her death. Interview clips with family members and community organizers revealed subtle but persistent suspicions that Jeremy may have been living in fear. A few friends described conversations where she hinted at wanting to help him get back on his feet, but felt emotionally overwhelmed. These details were not reported in early media coverage, but surfaced during podcast discussions and live streams. The motive, according to some independent creators, may have involved control, either emotional, financial, or personal. The narrative that began to emerge was that Jeremy might have believed she was helping someone reintegrate into society, but instead walked into a volatile situation. A petition was launched on Change.org demanding updates from the Memphis Police Department and asking that Jeremy's case be classified as a priority investigation. Within weeks, thousands had signed, citing concerns about a lack of urgency in the broader issue of unsolved cases involving Black women. A GoFundMe campaign was also launched by the family. Initially set up to assist with funeral expenses, the campaign was later expanded to cover legal consultations and private investigative services. The campaign page stated the family's belief that justice will not come without public pressure. Supporters donated, shared, and spread the fundraiser in solidarity. Influential podcasters began featuring the case in full-length episodes. Some released multi-part series exploring the timeline, while others invited criminologists and former detectives to discuss the case from a procedural standpoint. Several of these episodes went viral, with comment sections filled with viewers calling out law enforcement for remaining silent and demanding transparency. YouTube videos breaking down police response times, missed investigative opportunities, and gaps in public statements received tens of thousands of views. These videos pointed out that Memphis law enforcement had not released any suspect sketches, phone records, security footage updates, or formal suspect names. The result was a noticeable spike in online viewership and public interest. Many noted that without the efforts of online creators, the case might have faded entirely from public memory. As more eyes turned toward the case, so did amateur investigations and online sleuthing. Within true crime forums and comment threads, patterns began to emerge. Many focused on the boyfriend. Several content creators and users highlighted that he had both motive and opportunity. Being picked up by Jeremy just after release, he would have likely been the last person to see her alive. Yet his name was never officially tied to the case by law enforcement. Some speculated that lack of cooperation or resources may have hindered the investigation. Unconfirmed claims surfaced from individuals claiming to know the couple. These individuals alleged that the relationship had been marked by controlling behavior, including emotional manipulation and isolation from friends. Others claimed that there were prior threats, although no official documentation confirmed this. Still, these claims fueled the suspicion that Jeremy's death may have been a case of intimate partner violence, possibly escalating without warning. Alternate theories were also proposed. Some speculated that third-party involvement was possible, perhaps an old conflict, jealousy, or misunderstanding that led to the fatal shooting. A few suggested that Jeremy may have been targeted after reconnecting with someone from her past while trying to help her boyfriend readjust. Despite growing speculation, Memphis police never issued any public confirmation of a suspect. The lack of formal updates left the public without clarity, while online commentary only grew louder. Some critics of the investigation argued that law enforcement may have intentionally avoided naming the boyfriend without solid evidence. Others believe fear of litigation or public backlash might have contributed to the silence. Through all this, Jeremy's family refused to stop fighting. Each year on the anniversary of her death, family members and supporters hold candlelight vigils in her honor. These events take place both at the site where her body was found and near her childhood home. Attendees wear shirts bearing her face, hold signs demanding answers, and share stories about her life. Jeremy's 2 children are now being raised by her parents. According to interviews, the family prioritizes preserving her memory for children and explaining to them, in age-appropriate terms, what happened to their mother. Photos of her smiling with her kids are often shared at events to highlight the person she was beyond the headlines. The Caples family has also taken active steps toward justice beyond the court of public opinion. They retained private legal assistance to explore potential civil action and hired private investigators to re-examine the case. These professionals are reviewing phone records, seeking out new witnesses, and working with the family to reconstruct the missing timeline. Public appearances by the family continue across platforms. From local news interviews to podcast guest spots, the Caples family uses every opportunity to keep Jeremy's case in front of the public. Their message remains consistent. Silence is not an option, and justice requires persistence. Despite time passing and no arrest being made, the family's commitment has ensured that the story of Jeremy Caples is not forgotten. What remains is a community's unanswered questions, a family's relentless pursuit of truth, and a growing demand for transparency and accountability in cases like this. More than 3 years after the murder of 26-year-old Jeremy Caples, there are still no charges filed, no suspect arrested, and no clear answers from law enforcement. The silence has left a series of unresolved questions that continue to frustrate both the family and the public. The most pressing question remains: why was no one ever charged in her murder? Jeremy was last seen alive after she picked up her boyfriend from prison. Within 72 hours, she was found shot to death inside her vehicle in South Memphis. From the beginning, her family believed that someone close to her was responsible, particularly pointing to the man she had picked up. Despite the suspicion and the timing of events, police have not named him as a suspect, nor have they revealed any reasons for not charging anyone. This leads to further scrutiny of the investigative process. Did law enforcement pursue all possible digital and forensic evidence? As a public record, there is no indication that digital forensics were used extensively. No statements have been made about whether Jeremy's phone, the vehicle's GPS data, or any digital communication between her and her boyfriend was extracted and analyzed. The question remains whether these basic investigative tools were utilized or vital digital trails were ignored in the early days of the investigation. There's also been no public mention of surveillance footage from the area where her car was discovered. South Memphis contains multiple residential and business cameras, yet no footage has been released showing who last entered or exited her car. There are no known witness statements, and no timeline has been confirmed publicly by police. Similarly, her phone records and text messages have not been referenced in any official statements. If accessed, they could provide context about her final movements, last conversations, or any threats or conflicts. But again, the absence of updates raises questions about whether these standard investigative steps were ever taken. Was the boyfriend interviewed and released, or never thoroughly investigated? This question continues to stir tension between the public and authorities. The Memphis Police Department has never formally named her boyfriend as a suspect or a person of interest, even though he was one of the last individuals to see her alive. Family members have publicly stated that they believe he was never properly questioned or detained. There has been no confirmation that he was subjected to a polygraph test, surveillance, or digital monitoring after her death. No arrest, no charges, and no public record of investigative action directed toward the person most commonly linked to her final known hours has left many questioning the integrity or direction of the case. As of mid-2025, the case remains officially unsolved. The Memphis Police Department maintains that the investigation is active, but has refused to comment on the existence of any leads, persons of interest, or case status updates. The Caples family continues to make regular appeals to the public, urging anyone with knowledge of the events surrounding Jeremy's death to come forward. They've organized vigils, participated in interviews, and coordinated with advocacy groups to keep the pressure on local authorities. Despite these efforts, law enforcement has not held any public briefings, issued new bulletins, or provided forensic updates. Tip lines remain open, and local community leaders have made calls for justice during public events and rallies. However, no major breakthroughs have been reported. The last known public update from police came in 2022, when they stated they were still investigating and working all angles. As it stands, the community is left with a case where the victim is known, the possible suspect is known, but the evidence has either not been developed or not pursued publicly. This ongoing silence has prompted speculation of missteps, delays, or disinterest in solving a case involving a young black woman in a working-class neighborhood. Others believe that the initial 72 hours, considered critical in any homicide case, were mishandled or under-resourced. The lack of transparency has added to the distrust many families face when dealing with unsolved violent crimes in their communities. Now that the case remains unresolved and the investigation appears stagnant, viewers are left to form their own conclusions based on the information, or lack thereof, that is publicly available. Do you think law enforcement failed as family? The Caples family has said they were given little communication, and few investigative steps appear to have been shared. Should families be better informed during open investigations? Even if the case is ongoing, should authorities be more transparent in unsolved cases? In cases where there is no risk of compromising leads or suspects, should the police release more information to the public in order to assist with tips or witness identification? Was Jeremy's murder a case of intimate partner violence, or was someone else involved? All signs point to someone close to her, particularly the timing of her death following her boyfriend's release. But with no direct evidence shared, is it possible that the real perpetrator has not yet been named? Why are so many cases like this left unresolved? True crime cases involving black women and domestic relationships often receive limited media attention and fewer investigative resources. Is this another example of systemic failure or under-prioritization? What more could have been done in the first 72 hours? Could immediate arrest, forensic analysis, or seizure of digital devices have changed the course of this case? Were search warrants requested? Was enough manpower assigned during the initial response? The murder of Jeremy Caples is not just an isolated crime. It represents a wider issue affecting victims whose cases receive limited attention, minimal investigative updates, and no closure. The questions remain numerous, and the silence from authorities continues to frustrate those still seeking answers. While the case is listed as open, it is, by all visible measures, cold. Unless new evidence emerges, or unless the public applies consistent pressure, it is possible that Jeremy's death will remain unsolved, another name added to a growing list of victims still waiting for justice. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.